guest. Today we're talking cybersecurity, and there's no one better to talk to about that than Richard De Vere. Richard, you sometimes style yourself as the anti-social engineer. Why is that? And can you tell us a little bit about what you do as well?
Yeah, sure. Well, nice to meet you, Jim, and a great intro. The name is one of the questions I get recurringly as well. Why is it called the antisocial engineer? And I guess it's quite a simple story. I once did a very impactful pen test at a Premiership football club. We got back to the office, and the person that I'd gone to the test with, a fellow tester, was he just had his hands just around his head, just kind of what had happened. He was just in shock. And I said, it's social engineering, get over it. And he said, no, this isn't social engineering. He says, you're an anti-social engineer. And I really liked that. It kind of went in the pocket for a few years, as it were. But it was a bit of a running joke, I guess.
But that is now the name of your company, is that? Yeah.
When I couldn't think of a better name at the very start, and it kind of grew on me, the name, a little bit as well. It explains the company very well. It's what we do. My personality as well is probably a bit ASPD, antisocial, and there's a funny play on words several ways, because I probably look at the name of the company as Antisocial Engineer. For me, it means we're antisocial in the format of different to the expectations and norms. We want to be different, but obviously we fight social engineering crime, so I guess people think it's a play on words solely around there. But once you start to discuss the fact it's a multifaceted play on words, I guess it's kind of a good name. And
yeah, well, it's certainly one that people are going to remember anyway. Well, that's great. Now, we've got a little bit more about you on the screen as well. Just to say that we've got a few people who've telling us where they're. Graham is listening in from Greenwich, just around the corner from here. Harry is listening in from Reading, and that's 7 degrees and rainy. And the furthest away is Mark. Oh, I know. Hello, Mark. He's a great guy. He's a crisis comms guy in Canada. He's just north of Toronto, and it's snowing. Here, get this, guys. We're okay in London. In Toronto, it's snowing at the rate of 5 centimeters an hour. Not sunny and not 25 degrees. All right. Very good. Thank you very much indeed for all that. Now, just before we get into my conversation with Richard, I just want to launch a poll for you here, just to sort of take the temperature of our audience. And I'm going to launch the poll now, and hopefully you can see this, and just to sort of see where we are. So, have you ever been the victim of a hack? And I mean, I just really mean anything. It could be a full-blown cyber attack or data breach, or it could be just having your credit card cloned. So any kind of hack. Have you been the victim of that? Okay, and that's quite interesting. I can show you now that in fact everybody's voted very, very quickly, and there you go. There, I'm going to. I think you should be able to see this. You should be able to see the results now. So it's very much 50-50. Half of people have been the victim of a cyber attack, and half haven't. Do we have any statistics, Richard, on how many people have been victim, or is this too vague a poll for that?
Well, statistics are quite a funny thing when we look at cybercrime. Obviously, we assume that everyone wouldn't report the crime. Some people simply just don't know there've been a scam. So I guess like a common stat from the NCSC is there's over like 3.8 million people a year just in the UK alone. But this is from the ONS. So how we gather them stats is in big debate still.
Right. And I suppose
a good scam, you don't know you've been scammed. So it doesn't get reported, so we will never know the full story.
Well, my family has just been scammed. People were using our Netflix account right across the world, and Netflix phoned up and said, "Have you been listening to watching Netflix in North America and Birmingham and places?" And no, we hadn't. But so there you go. You never know. Even Netflix is vulnerable, but they soon sorted that out. So what I want to do now. Richard, is ask you this question, which hopefully everyone can see on their screen. This is a very personal story for you. Obviously, we're not going to get into personal details, but it really is interesting. You've written, after being personally affected by a life-changing cybercrime, I'm on a mission to balance the scales and protect people from the perils of the internet. And I think this was when your family had some problems with the internet, and you worked very closely with the police, as I understand it, to help out. Could you talk about this, please?
Sure. It's something very close to my heart. It's a story I've only disclosed to some close people in its full entirety, but it's very kind of triggering for myself. So I'll outline the issue, and basically I was a completely different person a decade ago. I lived in Australia, for instance, and like an event happened which completely changed my life. And I guess 10 years ago, I was a much younger person, a bit more naive to the ways of the world. And I was very much of that personality of, shaking the fist at the police. Why don't you do something? Why don't you catch the criminals? And I guess I was very similar to a lot of people, kind of mixed up on crime. They feel this kind of anger towards the crime, this kind of bodiless figure, and I really wanted to do something. It was around that time, because this incident shook me so much, it was just around this time I couldn't think of a better way to spend my working years. I just couldn't think of a better industry, a better trade, a task to better people than what I'm currently doing, and I did that. So it was a bit of an adventure. It started as a trauma and it ended as a bit of a magical adventure. But the outline was, it was powerful enough for me to probably self-learn and start that journey of self-learning. And, I was in a very different trade. I always knew I wanted to be the person I am today, but it was a very hard journey to get there. I could see the finish line. And I was kind of clever enough to know the steps between where I was and the finish line. But still, it required a lot of training. Nobody wanted to give me training, so I had to start a small business to gather some kind of on-the-job skills, as it were. I had to teach myself. I self-taught kind of obsessively, day and night. And after a while, building on my kind of lifelong skills, I've always been a bit of a nerd, but building on them skills, I got to a point where I felt comfortable applying for a job. I reached out to a local cybersecurity company, a very high, like it was a company that still is in very high esteem to a lot of people. And they gave me a shot. And I was up against graduates. I was up against people who have spent many years studying cybersecurity. And I think it was my determination, my personality. But in that interview right there, I got the job and I couldn't believe it. I knew that was the very start of the journey still. That was nowhere near the finish line at all. That was the first hurdle. I'd got on the ladder and I got to work with some very exceptionally talented people. To this day, they're still, I'll always be kind of forever grateful for what they taught me. These were people that were kind of robbing banks day to day. They were testing companies day to day. And I kind of, in that environment, I was nurtured and I learned, basically.
Okay.
The boss of the company was aware of my situation and he only went further to help, really. A chap called Andrew Mason.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, that's great. That sort of sets the scene nicely for us. So let's dig into this. Let's start. I guess kind of in a soft way. You do a bit of acronym and jargon busting on your website. I think we all know what phishing is. Although I must say, some of the phishing emails I get these days are unbelievably difficult to detect. Would you go along with that, Richard? Do you think they're getting better at it?
They are, and it's there's a consistent trend, I think, to become more and more realistic. The days of African princes with really glaringly obvious errors, they're starting to wean out. And
well, actually, I had somebody a couple of days ago, someone in Iran, no, not Iraq, I beg your pardon, in Iraq, who wanted to give me kind of millions of pounds as well because of the kind of ongoing civil war and so forth. So they're still there, these African princes.
It sounds like you should check, Jim. You should just
Yeah.
make sure that was a scam.
You think it might be real, Richard? No,
Well,
you're not being
I think
leading
that's for now.
astray here. So let's just bowl through this a bit. I'm a bit unclear about spear phishing. I like the words, but what does that mean?
Sure. I guess it's kind of a build on phishing. We all know what phishing is. It's that annoying email that lands in the inbox. It's fairly rarely, like it's obvious to to spot. We see some errors there, and phishing attempts normally are quite generic. But when we get to spear phishing, this is the result of some research. This is the result of some effort, and we see attackers involving the mark or the target in a certain situation where it's kind of pertinent to them. So a spear phishing email, you mentioned you're in London, Jim. Spear phishing email for yourself could be something tailored to London, maybe a transport for London receipt or something. So when we look at spear phishing, it's just regular old phishing with a lot more effort and a lot more.
I see. And that's a bit like whaling as well. I mean, I know the whaling is to go after high net worth individuals. But part of that is finding out all about them, isn't it?
Sure, and there is a bit of a hierarchy to phishing. So if we start off at phishing, and spear phishing is
Right.
used to be quite unique, but now we can send spear phishing emails to multiple people, so we can actually get quite good. When we get to whaling, it's very much focused on that person, and it overlaps with kind of CEO fraud. But whaling is, well, the way I look at it, Jim, is kind of phishing is what you do for 20 quid. Spear phishing is what you do for £1,000. Whaling is what you do for £1 million. Yeah. So that's the good way to look at it, I think, because whaling just means there's sometimes an unlimited amount of funds at stake. And we'll see in whaling attempts, we'll see not just sophistication in the actual design of the email, but the whole pretext, the whole supporting evidence of whaling is very powerful.
And I suppose, Richard, the fact that we allow so much of our data to go online these days, it's pretty easy to build up a picture. Because I guess what you're trying to do is just sort of give someone a piece of information that feels very private to them, and their response, my response, or whatever, would be, oh God, this must be real because this is something very personal to me. But we let go so much stuff these days that it must be quite easy just from open source material to build up a picture of somebody.
Sure. Open source, like we call it OSINT, or kind of open source investigation of data. We can collate some really scary kind of information. And, when we kind of look at phishing emails, social engineering scams in general, we tend to think it won't happen to me. I'm kind of exempt from this. But when we actually, I'll put my hands up. I've been very close to clicking a few links. That's just the nature of the business. I am a human, and therefore I have some flaws with the rest of the human race. So one of these triggers can sometimes be enough, and I think that's what a good fish has. It has that kind of hook, and it has that feeling. You have a feeling. For me, I'm a Yorkshireman. Yorkshiremen are very known.
We couldn't tell from your accent.
You couldn't tell. We're fighting the subtitles, Jim. But when like a Yorkshireman's very known for being thrifty, and a fish that got me last year, very close to getting me, was an Argos refund. I'd purchased something from Argos a few days before, and a text message follows through saying I'm entitled for a refund, and all these kind of crazy scenarios flow through my head. Maybe the person I purchased the item for didn't pick it up. Maybe this is automated. Maybe there's been a recall and it's been refunded. I don't know. Maybe I've paid twice and they've refunded one payment. So all these reasons were going through my head, and I thought this was genuine. I was happy. I'm getting some money back. So sometimes you have to really zone out and stop and have a second there to think about what's happening. Like in a good scam, it's quite hard to do, and most people don't notice that point to stop.
Okay, good. So, and fine, let's close this one out. What's tailgating? My terrible driving. What's all that about?
Tailgating, very similar to the driving situation where we're tailgating behind another driver. What we're doing is we're abusing the level of access granted to the person in front of us. What I mean by that is, we're kind of stood by the door, we're hovering around the car park, we're around the corner. Someone comes, approaches the door, They have authentication in the means of a RFID badge, or people know them. And tailgating is very simple. It's just it's the practice of zipping up behind that person and kind of using their access to enter the building as well.
Yes.
Very simple, but very effective.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose that could be looking over someone's shoulder at their computer screen, conceivably, or is that something different?
I wouldn't class it all together. Shoulder surfing is more that
Oh,
example.
right,
Is
okay.
it one thing you'll learn, Jim? There's terminology for everything in this field.
Yeah. I think we're going to
Shoulder
leave.
surfing.
I think we're going to. What we're going to do now, Rich, is we're going to widen out our focus, and we're going to look at the big picture now. This is more kind of serious stuff, I get. And my question is, as you can see on the screen, how secure are our networks? Is critical infrastructure at risk? And, there's been lots of talk about Huawei recently and the fuss about their presence on 5G. Is this for real? Can you talk about these subjects, please, Richard?
Sure. My opinion, at the least. But in this kind of area, I have seen recently, there's been quite a lot of, there's no other way to explain it. It's politics mixed with cyber.
Yeah, for sure.
And, the presence of, kind of victimizing or kind of making this brand the enemy, it's quite it's counterproductive, I think.
Making Huawei the enemy?
Yeah, sure. Making them, the enemy. Their equipment is solidly, combined with our infrastructure already. It has been for many years. Tens of thousands of people using their devices of all levels and roles and industries. I kind of think that we're missing the point. Like as simple as I can make it. If your biggest concern is this particular brand, then you've probably not addressed your risk model effectively. And it's a case of, it's such a high level. We are talking on a political level. It has more relevance to politics than it does to cyber. All our information's already flowing through Chinese manufacturers and Chinese devices. But why pick out that particular brand, and why now? I think that's my biggest kind of problem with it, really. I've seen it in the media a lot, though. I've not been a big fan.
Okay. Well, but what about the question about our critical infrastructure being at risk? We saw what the Americans did to the Iranians with their nuclear program. How secure are our, power stations or nuclear power stations? Is there a big risk here, or what?
Sure. I guess when we're looking at a general level, and we can pick out nuclear power stations as a really good example. I posted something last week where, they have consistently kind of viewed their risks. They've acted accordingly, and the nuclear industry is a very beacon to this. There's no other way to explain it, Jim. They have miniguns because their risk of physical attack can be great, and they consistently kind of assess their risk and come with outcomes and kind of preventions. So if it is kind of physical threats, they have everything from police dogs to a minigun. If the threat is cyber, they have very extensive kind of programs of testing, of improvements. And I guess, it makes great media that everything's broken. The nuclear power stations are just a tap away from blowing up. But we find in real terms, this is furthest from the truth. Not every industry is the same, I might add as well. So the nuclear industry is probably the pinnacle of physical security and also cyber security. When we look at other industries such as oil and gas, and we look at even something simple like water distribution nowadays, is all online, it's all combined. I think we've gone through that period of the initial proofing. If it could have been brought down easily, no doubt it should have been over the past few years. We've made enough enemies online. That's definitely no shortage of them. And I think, depending on what side of the fence you live on, it's either a scary risk that could affect everyone, or it's a risk that's being managed by someone else. And I think that's quite scary as well sometimes. I think that's quite a human trait to query things and to panic sometimes.
Okay, all right. So will you, I think from what you're saying, where I draw from what you're saying, is that we don't need to panic immediately, but
About
yeah.
everything. We have to panic. I consistently find every day people panic about the wrong things.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. What? Okay.
Personally, I've got more panic in password security, in two-factor, than I have in, kind of terrorism online. But that's my personal risk, and that's my personal views on the matter. Results may vary depending on whether you're looking after pictures of a cat or looking after nuclear launch codes. I guess you've got to look at that risk as well and start from there.
Well, obviously, looking after pictures of my pet dog would be very, very important, and I would demand security for that. But seriously, the two-factor authentication. Do you want to talk to that for a moment, please?
Yeah, sure. I guess it kind of gets lumbered down to me to explain what two-factor is and
I think you better have.
Sure. So two-factor, it's one of them life-saving devices, really, like features. Google launched two-factor many years ago, and last year they published the fact that about 10% of their customers use two-factor. The magic thing about two-factor is once it's enabled, it's actually very hard to bypass. So when we come across two-factor, especially in a company situation, and we're testing through phishing, we get really excited because we've got the password, and then we get really depressed because they've got two-factor. So two-factor really does stop criminals. But the thing is, it's got a bit of a brand issue. Two-factor's complicated sometimes. It can be confusing. It can stop you accessing that thing on the go. And people don't like it. People are a bit resistant to two-factor and everything. But like, as I say, there is massive defenses in just quite a simple thing. And there is a bit of a hierarchy to two-factor. We see kind of SMS two-factor being in the news quite a lot. It's very easy.
That's two-factor. Oh, so
sure. So,
right. I didn't appreciate that. So, like my phone and broadband. I don't think I'm giving anything. Perhaps I'm giving stuff away here. Is Vodafone, and for me to sign into my Vodafone account, they have to send me a little code on SMS, and I must admit I didn't realize that was two-factor.
Yeah, like it's a secondary step, right? You need the username, and now you need to have access to the phone, or to get that number. And I guess SMS two-factor gets its knocks because it can be bypassed. It's not perfect, but it's really good to kind of speed up adoption. It takes a few seconds. It's not as good as sole apps that do this, so things like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. These apps do provide additional cover, and there is a very clear hierarchy. To kind of level 0 is not having two-factor enabled and quite dangerous. The first level, or kind of the silver medal, I guess, is like SMS two-factor. But the gold medal is that app. It is that one.
Okay. Well, I think we better leave that there, but that's obviously something that people need to look into, not least of all myself need to look into this. Just while we're talking about this, can we just very quickly mention passwords? Passwords drive me round the bend. I can't stand them, but I'm aware that we have to use them. Is there any chance we're going to get rid of passwords? And what do you think about using password managers?
Sure. Well, we've seen many a company try, Jim, and I think it's been the holy grail of cybersecurity. If you can design a product that doesn't use passwords and is just as secure as everything else, then I'm sure you'd be a millionaire in a few days. But the point is, kind of, when we see, well, personally, when I see passwordless solutions, the first thing I do is look for where they're using passwords. So, like a product that's offering a passwordless future, I'll find within a minute that they're using passwords on about 8-9 accounts. And their technology, although it's advanced and unique and new, isn't adoptable. It's not usable for them. So even the companies that are selling passwordless logins don't have great success. So that's my view on that. But what do we do in that problem? Back to the square one predicament where we need to manage our passwords. We have that problem. I think a password manager is the only device that can do that securely. Humans, unless you're some kind of prophet, I really don't think humans can remember the complexity that a password needs. And if you can,
no, because sorry to interrupt, Richard, because if we do that, we write it down in a Word document and store it on our computer.
Sure. We have a limited memory. Yeah, we can't just
Yeah.
random strings, and this is what passwords kind of need. This is the holy grail. We need to have unique, strong passwords, and by strong I mean 20 characters, either a passphrase, which is like a sentence. The black bar on the website would be a great password, but not now, obviously. But the whole point of a password is to make it very long and very unique. So kind of password managers do help with that. It's baked in.
Well, I have to say, I use a password manager, and it may not be perfect, but it is pretty good, I must say. I probably need to keep it more up to date than I do. But
May I just shout out as well, Jim? Like, if anyone's listening that is interested in password managers, they don't want to make a financial start to that. They just want to dip the toe in the water. There's a really good brand called KeyPass X, which offers a free solution. And there's also others out there as well that offer a free for home use. So people can find success in that quite easily.
Yeah, I mean, I use one called Dash Lane, but I think
good.
I pay about £30, 30 UK pounds a year for that, but it seems to work pretty well.
I'd rather see someone on a free trial, I'd rather see someone using a password manager of I guess we say in the industry, we say kind of popular nature, or a successful or a leading brand of password manager. Whatever you want to pick, whatever flavour's up to you, but as long as it's a leading brand, then we can almost assume that it's been safe, it's been tested, it's been used.
All right, good. Well, let's just move on a bit. That's interesting stuff. This is a general point. Why do people get involved in cybercrime? Is it just an easy way to make money? I remember when the TalkTalk thing broke, we discovered there were teenagers who were doing it in Northern Ireland. Well, what's the deal with cybercrime? Do you have any insight on this?
Sure. So I'm going to say it's a very kind of boring answer, but it's the same reason we start wars, Jim. It's power, it's fame, it's money, it's kind of other reasons. And back to human nature, I think cyber's a new thing. The past kind of 50 years, but I kind of think the medium has changed, but people haven't. So people have always tried to one up each other in different ways, and I think cyber is just that great medium. When we look at cybercrime now, there's a massive financial interest, and people can be rewarded for their crimes. They can get that feeling of power when they take down a big brand or something, or make an impact. So I guess it's all the kind of traditional reasons we'd assume it is. I don't think there's anything crazy in that field. It's normally kind of in a hierarchy of money being up top and the main reason, kind of financial reasons, followed by kind of different like emotional reasons such as anger, jealousy, these kind of things.
Perhaps you could have gone into cybercrime, Richard. Now there's a thought.
Well, I'd probably make more money, to be fair, but it's not as a rewarding life. I guess it's what triggers that person, isn't it? It's what drives that that character. For me, the money was not even a consideration. It literally come as a byproduct of being an obsessive person. But the money wasn't my drive. But I think for a lot of criminals it is, and I think that's the main reason.
Well, we do know that people make a lot of money out of it. So
anyway, they can do, but we always see the success stories. We see the Lamborghinis on LinkedIn. We see the the selfies with the masks on and stuff, and we see all that. We don't see the sleepless nights. We don't see the negative bank balances. We don't see the downsides. So we always see one side of cybercrime, and it is the glossy, sexy side that people like to see. And we never see the criminals when they lose. The people that are starving because their scams aren't working. We never see that side of it. So
their Bitcoin account is raided, as somebody's was the other day. I saw on the news. Anyway, let's move on. I mean, this next question, I guess we could go on for a while on this, but let's keep this tight if we can. Yeah. When you do your pen tests and so, I assume people know what pen tests are. When you're testing a company's cyber capabilities, what are the common mistakes that you find? What can people do to protect themselves better?
Absolute basics, Jim. Every single time. The basics, despite being maybe a 10-man band from Sheffield or a multinational global conglomerate, they literally fail at the basics, and this is where the biggest danger is. So what I kind of consider the basics is good password management, making sure their like equipment is updated, you know, kind of making sure that people have enough education, right? We're using these very complex machines now to, you know, go about our life. Has anyone trained people? Has anyone trained their staff? So sometimes these are some of the biggest risks we see. People love to obsess on some of the more complex stuff, especially some of the social engineering scams, because the social engineering scams can be quite, you know, thrilling. They can be quite exciting for people, and they think that social engineering is the kind of the biggest risk. And I guess it comes down to being more of the basics, really. Social engineering works because the companies don't do the basics.
So, Richard, you're slightly losing me here. When you say social engineering, could you just unpack that a bit for me, please?
Sure. So let's take the most common social engineering attack, which is a phishing email, right?
Okay, yeah.
So let's say like a company is being targeted with a phishing email. There's some very common defenses that would stop that. Things like DMARC is a really good thing. Things like staff training.
What's DMARC? What is DMARC?
Well, DMARC is a combination of DKIM and SPF. It's basically a set of technical checks that's going to stop malicious emails kind of coming inbound, spoofed emails coming into your infrastructure, and also to an extent protect your customers as well. I won't try and ram DMARC into this, but one thing I will say is there's lots of information about there. There's a company called Global Cyber Alliance. They're very good at sharing information around DMARC. Get involved and listen to the DMARC information. It's absolutely essential if you're concerned about phishing, either for yourself as a business or your customers receiving phishing emails from you. DMARC is the way forward. It's quite a simple technical prevention, but we find companies don't adopt it. So again, this is what I mean by the basics aren't being covered. This is how we get success as pen testers. We exploit the basics.
Okay.
So sorry to disappoint, Jimmy. It's not the briefcase full of gadgets. It's not the the fancy moustache that's not being spotted. It's the absolute basics of a company that allow people in.
Okay, all right. I tell you what, I'm going to thank you very much for that, Richard. I'll tell you what I'm going to do now, just quickly. I'm going to launch another poll because this interests me. Where's my next poll? Here we go. I'm going to launch a poll, and hopefully you can see this. Now, do you have? I'm interested to know. Do you people who are listening? Do you have a specific cyber plan or playbook? In the wonderful world of crisis management, of which I'm a proud member, people are somewhat moving away from business continuity plans, generic business continuity plans, although they definitely still have a place, to using like playbooks, cyber playbooks, terror playbooks, and so forth. And I'm just interested to know whether people do use a specific plan or playbook. Is this a world you bump up against, Richard? I guess you do a bit, don't you?
Sure. With our customers, we work with them to design this playbook. So, like in a way, we simulate like attacks. So it's a case of the client company would have a particular concern, such as terrorism, such as cybercrime.
Right.
Then we'll simulate that scenario, and on the back of our testing, they'll definitely work towards a kind of playbook. It's tailored advice, and you say about BCP planning or business continuity planning. It is kind of not outdated, but it's quite hard to cover these niche risks, right? Stuff like phishing, like a physical attack. And I found some great success in this. Companies are going to benefit when there's a problem. There's a difference between a well-prepared company that's going to come out strong from the other side and a company that's going to fold. And it is that kind of prior planning. The largest companies, I won't name them, but the big four accountancy companies, etc. They would have
you just named them, Richard.
The big four accountancy companies is very generic, but they would have plans such as, what happens if a phishing email struck? What happens if ransomware? What happens if someone attends the building? What happens if someone makes a phone call, etc.? These are quite useful scenarios. We can look at risk before it happens, and we can actually plan to come out in like on the good side of this, you know, kind of before it's happened, prior planning, as per usual, like it pays.
Okay. I mean, I do think it's interesting. I mean, I get in trouble with some business continuity people because obviously they're very keen on their business continuity plans, for good reason too. But when it comes to terror or cyber, there are very specific things you need to do. And if those pieces of information are buried in a big plan, they sometimes can't be found easily and just end up not being used. So I am a bit of a fan of the playbook, I must say. I think it's a more modern approach. I guess you guys have been seeing this. There's my little poll there. So 60% do have a plan in place. So that's good to see. All right, I'm going to get rid of that. So let's just move on for a second. And I want to ask this. Internet of Things. Now, I'm a bit cynical about this, Richard. I think it's you cybersecurity lot, are just trying to frighten us with our smart fridges and our smart toasters and so forth, saying that we're all going to be hacked through our toaster. What's the real deal here?
Yeah, like I think it's quite common in life, isn't it? The truth is somewhere between the two extremes.
Yeah.
I think in it, like an IoT or Internet of Things devices, we're very much in that field. Look, I'm as paranoid as the next tester, and you know, we're obviously these are the enemy, right? These are the listening devices that we're buying to put in our houses. Question you should be asking yourself, Jim, is do I have them in my house? And yes,
well, I've got Alexa, so I suppose I have.
Use Google Home. You know, I think that we have to kind of go with cyber. We shouldn't use it as a kind of us and them. It should enable our lives and it should empower us. I think, is the technology empowering you? Is it making your life better? Is the question people should be asking. Now, there's going to be a trade-off. If we take a smart speaker, something like an Alexa, a Google Home, etc., there is a trade-off, right? They're going to get your data. They're going to get your search requests. So if there's a search request made by that speaker, it's going to be logged by that company. Now, this is where we kind of fork in the road, and this is where a lot of the security community have problems. You know, the very fact that you've searched for something is now on a log by the likes of Google and Amazon, and this is terrible. But they tend to use this information just to sell you more stuff, just to target adverts. So for me, I'm going to get adverts regardless. And it's a case of, you know, these adverts are going to be a little bit more tailored to me. I don't think this is the risk that people should be concerned about. I do think data privacy is very important. I don't think the Google Homes and the Alexa are the enemy. They've become the whipping child for data privacy problems. And I think there's much more than that. If you're concerned with the data privacy of your Google Home, you're concerned with the data policy of Google. If that is a problem, if that isn't to your liking, do not sign, do not buy the devices. And I guess people have to ask themselves that question, because we see the horror stories. People are listening to search results in Germany. Amazon technicians are listening into queries. Siri's recording everything. But is it just the medium of the 2020? Is there, you know, is it any different to, you know, the stuff of yesteryear? And people have to ask themselves what it matters to them, you know? Like, is it making my life better or is it making it worse, really? How I use the device, it makes my life better. It like assists me. And I think the risks, they're to be debated, but it's not really a concern for me, Jim.
Okay.
I guess
it's interesting. I mean,
I'm really paranoid about this, but I'm not.
No, okay, all right. Well, it's good. It's quite reassuring to hear that you're not.
May I just say, on the flip side of this, Jim, you know, we have had problems such as the Mirai attack, where Internet of Things devices have been compromised. They've been bought into a big botnet, and like IoT security has a bit of a reputation for being abysmal. When we step out of the Amazon and the Google ecosystem, we can go into devices made in foreign countries and made in on a budget. I think this is the bigger risk. So I'm going to leave this just on this point. If you're concerned about data privacy, chill out around Alexa and Google and Siri, but do explicitly ban products that are made in a few days by some startup abroad and they've not got any considerations, any safety preventions, no way to reset the password and make it safe. Chuck them away. But yeah, it's a personal preference. It boils down to.
All right. Okay. Good. Let's. Haven't had any questions recently, guys? Anybody out there want to pop some questions to Richard? You know, we've only got about 10 minutes to go. So if you've got any cyber questions, please butt in and ask us a question. Just moving on a bit to sort of more government-related things. You talk about in your writing about regulation to combat fraudulent communications. You know, what regulations would you like to see, and what can the government do to combat cybercrime?
It's a really good question. It would make me the happiest man alive if there was some support from government, I guess. And what I mean by this is, I was in a meeting with a chap from the Met Police, and it was a time where people were very dismissive of regulation. And it's a case of, you know, I spoke to this chap, and he explained how he'd brought in regulation to stop printing fraud. So in the 1980s, people producing money, people producing currency, fake documents, needed materials such as paper and inks. And the regulation that he brought in solely himself helped to reduce this kind of fraud. I kind of want to, I was excited by this, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And I do think regulation is what's going to stop the problem, or what's going to reduce it. What I mean by this, Jim, is we can get too much regulation. I'm going to pick out an example here of China. Okay, so in China, you cannot spoof a text message. It's impossible. Their government has controlled that situation to the point where it's not technically possible to spoof a text message, which I find quite exciting in a way, because in the UK and other countries we don't have enough regulation, and it's too easy to do basic things like spoof a text message. I think it's a bigger problem, Jim, and I don't think regulation alone will combat this, but a mixture of regulation, enforcement, proactive measures. I think it's getting to that tipping point where we need to do something. And if my idea of regulation is the only one that's kind of on the table, then maybe it's time to address it, maybe, or just kind of view it. It's only one way forward, but I do think it'll be successful. You know, what harm can it do?
I mean, you complain about the government not doing enough, but we do now have the National Cybersecurity Centre. How are they doing? What's your take on them? Are they worth their pay? Are they available? Can organisations approach them for advice? What's the deal with them?
Yes, is the short one, Jim. I think it's great progress. I've personally had my own disagreements with them, and I've not saw eye to eye with everything that they've said. But I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think we lacked that space for a long time as a nation. We didn't have that authority figure when it came to cybercrime. As a young tester, kind of when you see an issue, I didn't know where to report that issue. It's only in the past couple of years that we've seen this kind of support and this kind of collaboration from industry. Now, it's not perfect, and they can be quite dismissive around certain things, but the big effect that they're offering, I think, is quite good. In one thing I will plug is a service they run called CISP. CISP is a service they run to share information. It's the cyber information sharing platform. So they have good success as well. And on a personal level, there's a chap called Ian Levy who brought a lot to the table. He did bring a lot of good things to the to the organisation.
Okay, all right, good. Just one thing that, just blowing our own trumpet at You Do Sentinel, one thing that we do, which I think is quite good, and I've done it at other companies before, but we use Slack to send information to each other. Slack, I assume, do you, Richard? Is quite useful? It's like Yammer.
Yeah.
And we have a Slack channel that we use where people can put, if they get a phishing email, then you post it up there so that it's shared with everyone, so everyone can see the kind of area that, you know, we might be attacked, any kind of new kind of phishing email. And it just sort of keeps people on their toes, I think. And I think it's quite useful. What sparked me is what you were saying about sharing information, and that's the way we do it at UDO, is we share any kind of phishing attacks that we see. I'm just going to say that. Tim has asked a question which I can't answer, but maybe you can, Richard. Is Cyber Essentials a good indicator of a secure organization?
Really good question. So Cyber Essentials is the go-to scheme in the UK. And look, if you're going to get a certificate and think you're going to be safer because you've got this piece of paper in your hands, then you're probably not. If you're going to look at Cyber Essentials as a process, that you can look at some key areas and work on them and build to the point where we can get accreditation for Cyber Essentials, then I really do think it is a worthwhile area. You know, I have to speak very highly of them because, again, a bit like the NCSC, there was a big void before Cyber Essentials. The companies that wanted to do something didn't know what to do, and they haven't got time to, you know, contract with 100 different companies to get bits of information and doing it their way, doing it their way. Cyber Essentials was that kind of overarching scheme that it needed. And I think if you just, the first point, anyone that's curious about Cyber Essentials, just go on their website, look at the checkboxes, compare that to your organization, and start to think, would I be safer with you know, some of these checks being done? If you are, then brilliant. Work towards that process. They have a very minimal level. So the first one is a self-certification, and that's something you can do with a form, a few £100 or a minimal fee, and you send that off, and you've got the certification. The goal really for an organisation is to build upon that process to the point where they can get accreditation from a third party, and I think that's the one company should be aiming for, to be honest, because it's not just a like a self-certified certificate. It's the fact that that's been independently audited, and it's definitely a good check for a company. There's very few that compare with it. So if you're starting off in the cyber field, at least look at Cyber Essentials, and you know, you don't have to apply, right? You can still read the website, take the tips, and do them before even applying. Yeah.
Okay.
I think what most people miss. It's a bit like ISO 27001. You can bring in some of the factoring points. You can learn from that experience without getting the kind of accreditation straight away.
Okay. All right, Richard. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope that's useful to you, Tim. We're sort of coming towards the end here now. And so really, I want you to get the old crystal ball out here, Richard, and gaze into it. And what do you see? Where's all this going? What does the future hold? What trends do you see emerging as far as cyber attacks go and as far as cybersecurity goes?
Well, of course, Jim, it's going to be what's on the Gartner Magic Quadrant and the Forrester Waves. No, I actually think it's going to be the same, Jim. I'm not to be a pessimist or kind of sound like I'm depressed in my trade, but I think it's going to be pretty much the same as last year, but worse. And it's going to be a case of, you know, what's going to work. And we've seen this trend over the years where technical defenses are getting harder and harder. And it's coming down to, you know, the kind of human element. And however we can target humans, the better. So whatever mediums we can use, such as text messages, such as phone calls, I do think social engineering will increase. That's not my magic ball working at full optimization, but it's a case of, I do think cybercrime is going to get worse. The only thing I can say to that is a positive trend over the past few years, endorsed and supplied by the ONS. So I think if you're going to buck that trend, if you're going to disagree with the fact that cybercrime is going to rise over the next few years, you better bring like a good mathematician, because the stats show otherwise. And I hate to leave it on that kind of pessimistic note, Jim, but that's my predictions for next year. More scams.
Okay, that's good. I mean, this is not an original thought, but it holds true for all that. That I think, you know, the responsibility for cybersecurity no longer just lies with the IT department. It's a boardroom issue as well. And the chief executive needs to be up to speed on this. Now, a lot of chief executives are not in the first flush of youth and grew up when a computer took up a whole room. And while they're not going to solve the problem, they do need to know the questions to ask, right?
100%. Yeah. They look. You don't have to be a young person to understand and keep safe online. If anything, the opposite. Use their kind of attributes as always. Use your attributes to what you can do. If you're just an aged businessman that's made all this money in business in very traditional fashion and you're stuck with the cyber risk, then it's just a consultant away, very much like any other business problem. And I think, you know, age is a bit of a tap out where we kind of, I'll tell you now, we've assessed large organizations with different age groups and they don't click more. Old people don't click more. So
right.
really interesting, you know, 21, 50, there's no discernible difference in the click rate. Young people click because they're haphazard, they're in a rush, they're au fait with technology, they trust everything. And older people that aren't familiar with technology tend to click because they don't understand the scenario or they've been duped by a newfangled technical measure. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that one.
All right, Richard. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Just to say thank you very much indeed for really fascinating stuff and a great conversation. So thank you for that. I hope everyone has enjoyed that. I'll be running another webinar next month, so watch out for that. I'll be sending out details shortly. But in the meantime, Richard, thank you very much. And it's goodbye. Bye-bye now.
Bye, Jim.
Bye-bye.